I too loud here? Okay, perfect. Let's get started. So, to start off, of course, we talk about what is a hurricane, we talk about the basics of how a hurricane is formed. I will give you an opportunity to read that. I won't go into the science and everything behind it, just because I assume all of us know how a hurricane started and why it's so important here in Mérida, which is why we're here today. And so, just to make sure I explain the Bible part, so we care, there's a fly. We care about hurricane preparedness in the sense here in Mérida and in the Yucatan Peninsula itself, because of course hurricanes are among the most dangerous and destructive weather systems on the earth. Here being on the peninsula and where Mérida is specifically located in the peninsula, we are either usually lined up to get a full force hit or honestly strong aftermaths of a hit that maybe hit somewhere like Cancun or Cozumel pretty harder than Mérida itself. So we always want to be aware and prepared for any hurricane instances, especially since we pretty much only have 2 seasons here. We have hurricane season and non-hurricane season. It's hot all year round, so but we just want to make sure that we are aware and prepared as well as we can be, which is why we are doing this presentation, and we hope to make sure that this presentation is something that can continue and be here for the community around hurricane season. Okay? All right. So this is where we kind of get into the more important parts of why we're here today. As you saw, just a few, maybe a month ago, it's 2 months ago now. Oh wow, 2 months ago, time is flying. So about 2 months ago, we had our first kind of taste of the hurricane season. I believe we got all the way up to orange, if I'm correct, right? Okay, we got all the way up to orange around July 4th with the hurricane that came through here. Of course, Mérida only ended up seeing just kind of some light rain, not much force, not much damage as we're seeing in parts of Cancun or Cozumel and Playa del Carmen. But of course, we want to make sure that we understand all the alerts that are going out, and I'll just put a little information out here that we are actually, the department is transitioning to a new alert system. We'll be sharing more information about that. About 2 weeks from now, we'll be transitioning to a new system to send out alerts to the community. That way you can better, so you can sign up through email, sign up through text, things like that, so you'll be able to get essentially notifications of events and other natural disasters such as a hurricane. And so, of course, with our first level, we have our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Usually, Mérida is around the yellow and orange range when it comes to rainy season. Sometimes we're in the green, but as we saw, like I said, July 4th, we hit the yellow and orange. I don't believe we ever got to red officially, but don't quote me on it. But when we're talking today is more focused on the yellow and orange range about the preparedness aspect. So the preparedness starts, of course, when you know that there is likelihood of a hurricane here in Mérida. It's hurricane season, so we know there's likelihood. So 1 and 2 are already kind of assumed. And we just want to make sure that when we get to 3 and 4, the community knows what they should be doing. All right, so let's talk about what are pretty much the 2 main things that we're here to share today are the building your kits and making a plan when it comes to hurricane preparedness. To explain the kits, they can be as simple as a backpack or as elaborate as more so duffel bags and canned food and everything. But when you're building your kit, you just want to make sure that you have basic disaster supplies. These things are simple as a flashlight, some canned food of some sort, and some water for some sustenance. Additionally, you want to make sure you have certain emergency supplies, and you also want to make sure that you have a first aid kit. One thing here that is actually easy to get and I've found cheaper than in the States is actually buying first aid kits. In the States, I've found them to be crazy expensive, but here in Mérida, you can get more for your money. So it's a lot easier to go out, especially in one of the pharmacies, so 24/7. You can actually create your own emergency kit. I wanted to have a kind of list of items for you guys today, but instead of printing it out, we're going to have it in the slide setting paper, and you can take pictures, so you'll have it for yourself, okay? So also feel free to take pictures if you want to. And lastly is supplies for your unique needs. So if anyone has any allergies or anything, you want to make sure that you have those specific supplies for yourself. And then of course you want to make a plan. So consider your family needs, considerations for individuals with access and functional needs. Of course you want to consider any infants and young children that you have, seniors, pets, and of course know your nearest shelter. And just to let you know, at the end of this presentation, we've gone through and updated all of the nearest hurricane shelters here in Mérida. And so you can just take a picture of it. And these are updated as of today. But I do want to say that those can change. If you go to the Protección Civil's website, they will always have the most updated information. But as of today, what we shared at the end of the slide, those will be the most updated hurricane shelter. All right, so let's talk about building your kits, okay? So as I said, this could be something as simple as just a backpack with the necessary supplies to hold you over for a hurricane. And so we'll start off, of course, with water. Of course, is one of the most important things. You think of the idea in 3-3-3s, 3 hours without air, 3 hours with little air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. So we always want to think about in disaster scenarios of 3-3-3. And so water, of course, you want to have 1 gallon of water per person. That should last you for about 3 days. Food, at least a 3-day supply of non-perishable foods. So things like those canned beans, those frijoles, they're super good and they're cheap, so you can make it happen. Battery-powered or crate-powered radio and flashlight, local maps, things like that. And luckily, if you guys subscribe to the Yucatan today, and I actually saw a few here at the MEL, within the Yucatan today, it actually has a map of Mérida and also the Yucatan Peninsula itself. So that's very useful to have. And also, of course, for your electronics, you want to have your chargers and a portable charger to charge those things. Okay. Next, you want to make sure that you have, and the right side column is something where you can get into the more unique needs of your household or your family. You want to make sure that you have a dust mask, plastic sheet, and duct tape to shelter in place. You want to make sure that you have a whistle to signal for help. Usually in winds, whistle sound is one of the more recognizable things to be heard. Moist towelettes, you can go to Costco and get some of those wipes or baby wipes and things like that. Garbage bags, plastic towels for personal sanitation, and a wrench or pliers to turn off your utilities, especially those gas lines. Most houses here are powered by gas, whether even some dryers are powered by gas here. So you want to make sure that you can turn all of those things off as part of the hurricane preparedness. And then next, of course, is the manual can holder for your food, and of course the first aid kit, as we mentioned earlier. All right. Any questions? No? All right, I'll continue. So additional emergency supplies. You can go through prescriptions and medications and glasses. When it comes to prescription medications and glasses and things like infant formula and diapers, and this is something that is, of course, is more unique to your family situation. But if you are someone that gets your medications or your medications need to be temperature controlled, this is something where you have to take an extra step in your preparedness. Something as simple as maybe getting a cooler, having a cooler on hand, and making sure you have enough ice to put in said cooler, so that way the necessary medication can stay temperature controlled. Because as someone who has a family member that needs temperature control medication, it's extremely important to make sure that that is properly maintained, because it can cause adverse effects if not properly adhered to the guidelines. Next, of course, is pet food and extra water for your pets if you have pets. And then next, paper and pencils, important family documents. And essentially when it comes to important family documents, you want to make sure that you have a few main things: identifying documents, and unfortunately documents that would identify what you would want if you unfortunately did pass. So something like a will, and things like that. You want to make sure that you have those things with you, especially when you are abroad. And sleeping bags, warm blankets. The warm blankets for here, you know, do you really need it? I don't think you really need it. But hey, I've done my job, I said it. And of course, you want to make sure you have a fire extinguisher. As I said, a lot of things in the homes here are powered by gas, so you want to make sure that you have a fire extinguisher. But before, you want to make sure you have pliers and have turned off your gas valve, anything else that could be connected to gas that might realistically explode. And next, matches in a waterproof container, feminine supply of personal hygiene items, paper cups, paper towels. We try and make sure that we have reusable things here, but in the case of hurricane preparedness, I'd say it's okay to have your paper towels or paper items, so that way you can make sure that you have your necessary supplies already stocked away. And lastly, but not least, are the household chlorine, bleach, medicine droppers. So these are all things you can do to treat your water. Let's say you've run out of your gallon of water for each person, or you just need more water for some reason. You can treat your water. I'm not a scientist, so I can't give you the full details about it, but this is what we've been authorized to share on that process. So I'll just link that information up there for you to take a picture of. And lastly, of course, is the complete change of clothing, and make sure that you do have the necessary clothing. Here in the heat, you don't necessarily need all that clothing. You honestly might just want to just go crazy and just be without it. But you want to make sure that if you are stuck somewhere, that you have the proper clothing. And you also have things to kind of keep yourself busy. So these are like books, games, just something to keep you occupied in the time. The Mérida English Library is a perfect place to check out a few books. So if hurricanes coming, why not get your favorite book to keep you company? Any questions, David? All right, so continuing with building your kit. So this is where we get more into if something happens, if an injury happens, what should I be doing? And essentially this means that this is what should be in your first aid kit. It is not an exhaustive list, but it is more of the most common things that should be found in a first aid kit. You can, of course, tailor it to what your needs are here in Mérida. So I won't go over all these, but I saw a bunch of you take a picture. So please, if there was a spot to take a picture of outside of the shelters, it would be this spot. So I'll give you the chance to take a picture if you would like, and then I'll continue on. Or if you have a question, let me know.
Is it possible to move the screen up a little bit so I can...
To move it up a little bit?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Perfect. The title doesn't matter up there, it's fine. That's cool. It says first aid. It says build your kids. Take that picture. We're good? Picture. All right, so we've touched on this a little bit earlier. We're going to talk about, again, the supplies for unique needs. This really goes more so into young children, infants, babies, and older adults. And so we always want to make sure that our family members are being considered in our kits. We're going to get to actually making the plan later, but as of right now, this is for the basic kits and adding in your unique needs. And so for babies, formula is something that's extremely important. You always want to make sure that you have formula, you have diapers, bottles, medications, moist towelettes, powder milk, things like that. And for adults, any denture needs, any contact lenses, supplies, and extra eyeglasses that are needed. Of course, when it comes to things like your heart health and high blood pressure and insulin, you want to make sure that you have those prescription drugs for yourself and also stored in the proper manner. All right, so now we're moving on to making a plan. So you have your kit, you have what you need to put in your kit. So the next steps are to make a plan. So this is where you will be meeting with those in your household or those close to you in the community near you about what you guys would do in order to prepare for hurricane preparedness and honestly in any other situations. So for myself, before coming to Mérida, I had that talk with my family, and then we had the talk when we first got here, and we actually had that talk about every 6 months. And so just to make sure that we have our kids, that we are prepared, that we understand what our duties are within the family and what each person will be doing if a disaster does hit, such as a hurricane. And so if you're someone that, for example, if you come to the MEL often, I don't know, I'm sure the MEL has their process, but it will be important for you to learn about the processes of the places that you visit often, or at least spend a good deal of your time, because each place is going to have their own process as well. And of course, you also have the shelter if you're out in the community, which we'll be getting to, okay? Any questions? All right. And so next, of course, when it comes to the making a plan, you want to consider access and functional needs for individuals in your families or those places that you're going to spend most of your time. You want to make sure that you identify any of those resources that they need on the daily. So if the temperature control medicine is something that's needed daily, you want to make sure that you have a plan and enough resources to make sure that you can meet those guidelines and probably provide those supplies to said family. All right, and then of course, if it's the young children, one thing that we wanted to share is ready.gov/kids. If you have children or if you have young children that visit you often, this is a great site for you to get more information, not just planning for hurricane preparedness, but for other essentially disaster scenarios and preparedness scenarios for yourself. So, and then it's the same thing for older adults as well. But you can take a picture of that. All right, and so just as a quick raise of hands, how many people have animals here? That's okay. All right. So, as someone who's a pet owner, avid dog lover owner, my pet is extremely important to me, and so having a plan for your pet is also extremely important. The caveat, though, is your pet isn't as flexible as you are. You can't really explain to your pet that a hurricane is happening. And one thing to keep in mind, especially for dogs, I don't know about cats and other animals, but for dogs, when winds get up to a certain speed, then they lose their sense of direction, lose their sense of home. So something can be going on outside of your gate at your house, strong winds, whirling, and they can lose their direction. So that's something to keep in mind. So you always want to make sure that you have a plan for your pets, but a plan that considers your pet's capabilities. So, yeah. For pet owners, I'll let you take a picture. And if you do have cats or anything like that, that are more kind of street cats, wild cats, and things like that, just kind of come to your house to be fed. If you care about them, which I guess I hope you do, understand that they also can't survive on their own. But definitely don't put yourself in danger to go out after them if you have no idea where they are. All right, so this is a map. Yes.
Actually, going back on the other slide, on the bottom, it says some of the shelters wouldn't allow pets.
Yes. So that is specific to the shelters, and honestly, that is specific to the shelter and who you're speaking to at the shelter. So I couldn't give you an exhaustive list of who would accept pets because maybe that day they might have too many pets, or they just might not have the resources to accept pets anymore like they thought they would be able to. Unfortunately, that's the only answer I could give. But it is not all shelters accept pets.
Would you know before or
that,
when you show up and then they say no?
That's a great, yeah, that's a great question.
Well, do you know where to seek information on shelters? That would be a question.
Honestly, when I'm only here 6 months, and when we had the first one, I looked at that list and I couldn't figure out where the heck my shelter was. So we had no clue where we were supposed to go.
Yeah, civil protection, as Don was saying, is the source. They're the lead during the crises of this nature. They're the ones that are coordinating all efforts. But you normally, depending on where you're at, most of you reside here around the downtown area, right? Or you might go. So, well, around the Mérida city, most of the public schools tend to be converted into public shelters. So just be mindful that the addresses that you might see, it may not be publicized as a school, but the majority of them tend to be schools. And they use the public spacing on those locations to shelter in. But those do not necessarily have the capability to shelter in as well pets, because they might require additional care for. So that's something that you would have to consider. Probably talk to your local vet and see if they have other venues where they can help shelter your furry animals.
I'm just going to add that it's important that you do follow them on Facebook. Since, for example, with Barry, they were saying a lot of information, and they are in every state of Mexico. So they will give like a different advice in every state. For example, I remember that in Quintana Roo, that was actually an issue. So there was like a shelter just for dogs. So just, add them and follow through
And
them.
what is this?
Protección civil or civil protection
Oh, okay.
for this state where you are.
Yeah, I think I am.
Each state has their own, and so for Mérida, they have their own list. For Monroe, they have their own list. Campeche have their own list.
John might have touched based on the kid preparedness, but if not, you should definitely have some radio device or somewhere you can link radio stations. Because during the event, civil protection and the local stations tend to publicize, and they also do it in 3 different languages. Do it in Spanish, English, and Mayan. So keep a lookout for those notifications, so that both the National Water Commission and the Civil Protection can give you more information about the event. And it's a little bit local, not
Is there
just like.
one station or that you're?
No,
All
stations.
stations. This is a government effort, so it's not towards a particular station.
Especially once you get into that yellow and orange area, that's where a lot of this really gets activated. Because they want to make sure that they're getting the proper information out. In the gray area, it might be on social media or something like that. It's not necessarily on the stations as frequent. But once it gets to the yellow and orange, that's when you should definitely be tuning in to your local radio station for sure, if you need to correctly.
And just one quick message, because the airport always emphasizes me to say that to the community. During the event, the airport is not going to be a shelter. We've had a lot of expats that the first option is go to the airport, assuming that they'll have a proper place to locate and then be able to hop on a plane if needed.
That's not the case.
We do not know how every event is going to happen, so you should avoid going to the airport only if you're actually going to be boarding a flight at that moment. In the past, the Mérida airport was significantly damaged by one of the events about 20 or 30 years ago. So it was until the Army developed an air bridge and established air transportation to fly out everyone out, that they could reestablish operations. But it all depends on how the storm comes. Maybe they have to establish it elsewhere, Chichen Itza, for instance. So that's why civil protection should always become your good source of information. They will let you know the shelters. Worst case scenario, there's 2 major shelters, and it's mostly intended for tourists, but just in case you cannot find another one, Siglo XXI and International Convention Centers. Those are the major ones, and they are for the region. the state of Quintana Roo and Yucatan and Campeche. Those are the major ones. So we're talking about Category 5 major disaster. They're the big ones that would shelter in everyone from the peninsula.
Yeah.
Okay?
And so it kind of goes from the shelters that are up here. So if you see like the home and it looks like somebody running into it, those are the shelters. We'll give the list of the addresses as well. But it comes when something is happening, when we go to the yellow, the orange, and you are out and you need to find shelter. Those are one of the places you go to. But as it gets more important, you will go to more of those central locations, especially if you don't have any of these places near you. So now I'm about to show you guys the actual addresses, names, and everything. So that's a broad map, and the next will be more specific information. And so, of course, we have the district, we have the claim, we have the kind of headquarter name, the address, and the capacity. So, depending on where you are, you can kind of, depending on your individual addresses, you can kind of see where you're at. It starts from District 1, it goes all the way up. Oh, we're losing the top. Let's see.
That would be Newell's Chelsea.
Alright, so I'll change the next. Okay, change the next.
No, it's in District 1.
District 1, oh.
It was
Can we get you? Or right, so to shrink it a little bit. Can exit out of it and it just show it.
What's the numbers on the right side?
So these are the districts, so they essentially split. Did we lose one then? So these are the districts that Mérida has been split into. I guess is how they split Mérida. So if you know what district you live in, if you don't, we'll find out because they're really split out districts. Oh.
Yeah, the number on the right also talks about the maximum capacity
Of each
of the place. So you might see them at a small number, but keep in mind that there's multiple locations.
Yes.
And that's why I was talking about the public schools. Because you can see that there's a public school around every other neighborhood. So that's why.
And as we get
Fast
into
list.
District 5 and District 6, you're about to see more locations because that's where a larger part of the population lives. So as you can see, this whole slide is District 5. And perfect. Yeah, we'll just leave it like that. That's all. Oh, that's all.
I don't know what district I'm in.
How many do we have?
We have 2 more slides.
Okay, I'd stay here.
So looking at the addresses, you can see that this is mostly around the southern part of the city.
Yes.
Little by little it goes further north.
Alright, moving to the next one. And so, as Miguel was saying, you can see the schools have a lot more capacity than some of the other places. Alright, I'll move to the next one. There we go. A lot of schools. So when in doubt, a school is probably a safe place to go. And so, as Miguel was saying, as we were saying earlier, Protección Civil, this is where you'll be able to always get the most updated information. Definitely follow them on any social media that you might have. I don't know if they have actual radio frequency or anything like that, but
No.
they will take over whatever most popular organizations are. They'll be using those to send out messages and everything like that. But definitely follow them on any social media that you might have, and of course check out their website. All right, so that is it for today. Are there any questions or anything like that? Yes.
I have two questions. One is, when do you choose to go to a shelter? Why would you choose to leave your home?
So when you're looking to choose to go to a shelter, it's usually when you know honestly the preparedness of your own house. For example, in my neighborhood, there were a few people that were renovating their place, so they decided to go to hotels. But when you know that your place is essentially not as formidable as you believe it should be, then that's when you would choose to go to a shelter. And of course, if your place is getting damaged, usually in the heavy rain before the storm actually hits, then you can also go to a shelter there.
Also, usually also civil protection says that if there's immediate danger and you don't have time to go to your home, go to the nearest shelter. So that's when you should go instead to your home. When they tell you like, it's too dangerous, go to a shelter, don't go to your home.
Yeah.
We live in a state that's very prepared. They've developed a very preventive culture on natural crises. So I guess the strong recommendation here is, if the government is telling you seek shelter, do so. Because in past experiences, the community would not trust the government, and then that's when danger happened, because people would be out of place in the middle of the storm, and then obviously the significant casualties happen there. But if the government or civil protection is telling you seek shelter, and you don't have a proper place to do so at your own location, it's best to go to the public ones. Keep in mind that based on the geography that we live in, it's hard for a storm to stay for a prolonged period of time. In the vast majority of the cases, we've seen how the storm passes by, either going first to Quintana Roo and then to us, or going through us directly. But the vast majority of the times, they won't stay in the Yucatan that long. So, just consider that if you have to seek shelter, think about it on a 24 to 48 hour basis. Think about the kit, something that you can transport with you during that shelter time, and then be able to be back at your residence. Because I understand also the concern of leaving your stuff behind. What's going to happen to my belongings, my residence? The government does have a plan, and there's also response from a local army. The natural disaster plan goes in place as soon as the storm is going to hit, and depending on the color-coded category that are projected, that's what triggers for the army to come in. There's two major partners from the local government that work with civil protection: the army that establishes itself around the area, and also the Federal Commission, Electricity Commission, because they bring trucks to help power up the location as soon as the storm finishes, and they come from all the way around the Mexico. Everyone comes in, pitches in. Last time with Beryl, I saw trucks coming in from Culiacan, Sonora, like 24 to 48 hours in advance for the storm to hit. So just be mindful that whatever planning that you do for your personal stuff, consider that you might lose power for 24 to 48 hours, but after that, the Federal Commission is going to try to bring it in as fast as possible. If anything prolonged, then we're talking about a major storm. This is something that's beyond our capability.
And go ahead.
And then my second question is, if you are driving, for instance, we drive from the States to Mérida, what's your suggestion for that when you're passing through, a lot of states?
So you would still look at the civil protection, because they're in each state, and they would have the shelters for that respective state. If
Okay.
you're here in Mérida, you would use one of these for the convention. You would go to their specific shelters. The nearest one that you can drive to as quickly as possible.
Okay.
As Donald was mentioning, we're transitioning into a new platform, but definitely you should be enrolling, even if you're going there temporarily, on the Smart Travelers Enrollment Program, step.state.gov,
Yeah.
because you will get, even if you're stopping by Real de 14 for a couple of days and then going to Mexico City, just for that duration of time, let us know where you're at, so that during those lapses of time, the colleagues at the other districts can let you know about what's going on. And another option is, does anyone here have WhatsApp? So you know that there's groups. There's an actual group that parallel to STEP that's been developed by the Department of State. It's U.S. citizens in Mexico. You can search for it that way.
What do you search for? Yes?
U.S. citizens
citizens in Mexico.
Okay.
and any major announcements of an incident happening in Mexico is going to be posted there. For instance, the last one was the update on the travel advisory from September 6th. And before that, they were talking about gunfire incidents in Culiacan. I mean, this doesn't limit itself to natural crises, but any type of incident that's going on around Mexico, if you know for a fact that you're going to be traveling through the border or for whatever the reason, which is vacationing, use this source as well.
Okay.
So that's a great WhatsApp group to be a part of, just because you're here in Mexico. And then, of course, you can join STEP and save your actual location so you can get more specific and filtered information about where you're at. Yes.
I might have missed, because I came a few minutes late, did you do a slide on just preparing your house for the hurricane?
Oh, that's actually a good question.
Like
We
when
don't have a
taping
slide
and all
on
that?
actually preparing your house.
Uh-huh.
I haven't asked that question. That's a great question. Besides the usual, let me think a little bit. Of course, you want to make sure that you turn off any gas lines, since most of the houses are powered by gas. You want to make sure that you have your fire extinguisher, that is checked and properly coded. You want to make sure that any electrical things that you might have plugged in, TVs and things like that, you have those unplugged. And of course, also make sure, I don't know if, what kind of yards people have here, but your systems, like your sprinkler systems, you have a pool and things like that, that those systems are actually turned off as well. Because if a storm really does come through here, it can actually rip up some of that, and that's an even bigger issue, especially when it comes to water damage in your homes and things like that.
And do you tape the windows too? 'Cause, I mean, we were just looking at everybody else at what they were
There's
doing.
two takes on
There's two takes on taping your windows. The official answer is do what you feel is best.
In reality, the only benefit of taping down the window is that when it actually breaks, it's going to come down as like one piece.
Instead of multiple pieces.
Exactly. That's the only benefit. But in reality, it's not going to prevent it from
It's not going to stop the window from breaking.
And that's the other benefit.
Okay. And
Some
then
other-
moving your patio furniture and. bringing
Yeah,
that
definitely
outside.
move any outside patio furniture that you have. You would want to move that inside or put it somewhere that if it does, if something, if the wind does get to it, it doesn't go far. But yeah, the windows, it's just going to make sure that your windows doesn't break or make it less likely for your windows to break into a bunch of tiny pieces instead of break into 5 big pieces.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would do it for 30 odd years and taking your stuff in so it doesn't become a missile.
Yes, yes, that's a big thing.
And change the pool,
Yes,
you know, so your pool's off empty because of
the water and everything.
And the water deposits that you may have on the roof also, you can pan them down, because those can actually fly as well.
Yeah, pretty much if it's not essentially cemented and nailed into the ground, you want to make sure you can put it somewhere that you can minimize its ability to become a missile.
We've had even on social media some postings where people even jot down their address and their name on the water deposit because it's easy to not find out, and they can put it and send it back to you.
I heard
You
that
can see how
one.
much things can fly around.
Any other questions or anything?
I don't know if you can answer it afterwards, I still don't know where my district is.
Where your district is?
Yeah, Francisco de Montego.
Francisco
I don't know off the top
Montego,
of my head.
it's normally one of those big neighborhoods, but
Is it one of,
I don't know the districts by number, but
Chuburná will be the best
Would be-
for that.
Chuburná, Francisco Montego, and Chincoop. Those are the
Yeah.
three major ones that go around that area,
okay,
and they usually have at least one shelter each.
okay. Yeah, this is where we had no idea. One barrel.
But you're in a very well-connected neighborhood, so there should be at least one major venue where you can actually see shelter.
Yeah.
Also, for those who have solar panels on the roof, if it gets windy like it happens once they took off the water tanks in the house, you better take it off.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
unless you have the good insurance, otherwise they're expensive. But to take it off, you pay a company and it goes about 100 pesos for a panel. It's not
Yeah.
bad. Experience spoken to you, know. I do that. My last experience in here was like he was saying, my water thing flew. But when I hear they knew who it was because like he said, when they put it, my water tank and everything says Yuca Gringo, and they knew where to find it. So I had to give them some money.
You can go the other one.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, as of right now, we have the hurricane preparedness. We have the hurricane season. I would say that the Yucatan Peninsula itself does a very good job of preparing for hurricanes and sharing information